Welcome back to the Tea Party with increased production value. Welcome back to the Tea Party. We're not quite all mad here yet, and today I want to share the top 3 hand sewing stitches I think everyone should know. We'll be going over the top stitch, the whip stitch, and the ladder stitch. This last one is really handy if you're trying to keep your seams from being seen. Before we jump in though, I just want to say today I was going for a vibe of apothecary businesswoman who maybe spends a little too much time with the sorcerers and wizards of the castle. Leave me a comment below. Let me know. How did I do? That said, let's go ahead and get to the meat and potatoes. Today I'm using some scrap muslin fabric just to show you these stitches on. And I think I'm going to use, let's do red thread. I was going to use black, but I'm feeling red today. I'm going to be using embroidery thread just for the purposes of showing you on this video, but you don't have to use embroidery thread. You can use whatever thread that matches the project that you're going to be sewing on. I also have an assortment of needles because I do different types of hand sewing. I think I may actually use one of these. When you're working with embroidery thread, you are sometimes intended to split it into strands, and for the purposes of this demo, I may split this up. There are a total of 6 strands on embroidery thread. I may split this up and just use 3 for the purposes of the demo. When you're going to do hand sewing, regular thread does have a nap or a grain. So when possible, it's good to, in this case, I would want to thread my needle from this end. Also, you don't want to sew with a strand of thread that's like twice as long as your forearm, because you can agitate that grain and it just creates friction when you're trying to get your thread through your project. So the rule that I follow, I actually learned from Tula at Tula Pink, watching her English paper piecing videos. Maybe I'll link to that here. This is also a trick that I like to use to knot my thread. And I honestly don't remember where I learned this, but you take the end of your thread and place it down facing the direction on top of your needle of the eye, and then just wrap it 1, 2, 3 times, hold on to it, thread your needle through your loops. Watch this make a liar out of me because I'm recording a video. And that gives you a knot. Let's start with our top stitch. This is a really simple stitch to do. It's probably what I would recommend is the first stitch that you try if you're getting into hand sewing. But the straight stitch can be used for doing just a simple hem. When you're just trying to get 2 pieces of fabric together, you can use this to attach pockets. You can use it for decoration. It can temporarily help with fraying. And you can also use it for gathering. If you're just starting out, that might be a bit advanced, but you can play with it. Here I'm getting my needle grippers, and these are intended to help you pull your needle through your textile. They're essentially thimbles, they're just not metal. When I'm making a straight stitch, I like to do it this way from the same side, like the front side of the fabric. But if you're finding this challenging, there's nothing wrong with poking it through one side, flip your fabric over, poke it through the other side. Do whatever works for you. You'll get the hang of it. To tie this off, I like to do kind of a French knot method, kind of similar to how I threaded my needle, I'm now going to do 3 loops, 1, 2, 3, around my needle and pass it through. And you get pretty good at this over time. Sometimes you can still mess it up. I do occasionally still mess it up, but that's how I would tie that knot. And now you have a nice little top stitch. Another rule that I try to live by, if you finished a seam like this and you're about to start another one and you're like, I don't know if I have enough thread or not, just rethread the needle, because you don't want to get to the end of your seam and then you're fighting with your fingers and with the thread trying to tie this off. I'm going to go ahead and just knot my thread again. Do the 3 passes over my needle and voila, no problem. A whip stitch is good for joining fabric edges. And this includes attaching things like patches or appliques because you're going around the edge of your item to attach it to your fiber. It can also be good for closing seams on things that you don't mind having visible stitches on it. It's not great for stretch fabric though, because it does tend to really lock what you're working with in place. Now, if I wanted to tie this off, what I would do is catch either a very small section of my fabric on this side, or depending on what you're working with, just catch where your next stitch would go and catch just this back layer of your project and loop it through. Now you have a place here where you can anchor your thread or your knot. There we go. If you had a couple layers of fabric that were coming apart and you were just looking to mend it, this is a good stitch. Just doesn't look the best on this little flimsy muslin. This is my spare thread, my garbage bin. Learning to sew at my mother's skirt tail, something I always saw her do was either lick her thread, which you don't want to do because it doesn't actually help, or she would rub the eye of her needle on her scalp to get like oils off of the scalp. Also don't want to do that. If you're having issues, get a needle threader. Cool. Ladder stitch. This one's really cool. So a ladder stitch is basically invisible, and I've used this for tightening a waistband on a pair of pants. I've used this for hemming in a pinch. I've used this for mending. It's a great stitch to learn. The reason it's called a ladder stitch is because it kind of goes in a ladder pattern. So say I wanted to join this together with a seam that you can't see. Let's try it. I like to try to hide my thread tails where I can. Maybe put that a little too close to the edge, but if possible, I like to go straight into the edge of whatever I'm sewing. Okay. This is not how you would want to cast on, so please ignore that. But this is going to be the first rung of my ladder. See, and now I'm gonna go up here to start the second rung of my ladder. Whoop. Okay. Sometimes people keep this pretty loose, but I like to keep it pretty, I don't want to say tight, but you just don't want a bunch of slack. This is the third rung of my ladder that I just started. But see how I'm just jumping from side to side and I'm just moving up? To the side. The ladder stitch is also known as a slip stitch, and it's just a great invisible little helper. This is what you would use if you were trying to close a pillowcase or anything else that you have to turn right side out after you sew it together, but it's also great for making invisible repairs. This muslin's a little difficult for this. Up and to the other side. These are the rungs of my ladder. When I pull this taut, those stitches are gonna pretty well disappear. Now you might want to fiddle with it a little bit. Again, this muslin is just kind of flimsy. When you're doing this with a sturdier fabric, it doesn't tend to bunch up like this, but you get the picture. It's pretty good. If you're mending something, that's not something that's going to be easily noticeable. Let me see if I can show you now how to bury your knot. This is like a little bit of bonus content, okay? And so I'm not going to do my triple knot. Instead, I'm just going to loop my thread around my needle once. And I'm going to pull this taut just so I get my knot in here. Try not to catch that corner. Sometimes hand sewing is just patience, in all honesty, okay? I'm going to put my needle through really close to where my knot is. I've come in really close to my knot and I've come out a little bit away, maybe a couple millimeters away, you know? Now, this is tricky. Don't hold on to your needle when you do this, okay? Because you're going to have to give this a jerk and you don't want to stab yourself on accident. So come over here, kind of hold onto your fabric firmly with your non-dominant hand and you're going to pull. Oh, this went in pretty easy. And now I've buried my knot. You can't even see that. So now what do I do with this thread tail? Well, you pull this as far out as you can and just be really careful to snip this. Don't snip your project, only snip your thread. And now you can barely even see it. That's much less noticeable than a big honkin' knot hanging out there. That's the ladder stitch. Before we jump into the outro, I just wanted to ask you guys if there's something specific you'd like to know how to do when it comes to sewing. If so, go ahead and leave a comment for me below and I'll try to cover it on this channel. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in more content about sewing, self-awareness, I'm doing a no-buy challenge right now, or just some fantasy geek millennial lady and her cat, go ahead and subscribe. I upload videos most Fridays, and I'll see all of you ethereal little dumplings again real soon. Bye! Thanks so much for watching. I kind of want to cover this with my hair so the light doesn't shine through. Can you still see it? Is my hair possessed? My hair absolutely is possessed. My husband would tell you that. We weren't centered for